Hi, everybody. This is one of our key sponsors, LifeArc, for our conference. They're going to go through a session this morning about what LifeArc are, what they do, and trying to involve you in some of the questions and discussions they want to try and think about in advance of the conference, which we may even be able to continue at the conference and afterwards. So I shall say very much else, and I'll let Rebecca pick things up from here. Rebecca.
Chris, thank you very much. Can I just double check that you can see a slide and it's in presentation mode? Wonderful, good news. Thank you everybody for joining. It's lovely to see so many faces on this call, and we really appreciate you giving up an hour of your afternoon, particularly on a sunny Friday. Sorry if anyone's watching this back and it's not sunny anymore, but we have to enjoy it while we can. Chris has already mentioned that LifeArc as an organisation is really proud to sponsor the forthcoming National Patient Data Day. We're really excited to be able to have direct conversations in real life with some of you and other Use My Data members at that event about the work that we do at LifeArc. But we're really excited to be able to have an initial conversation with you all, which will help to shape our thinking in terms of conversations we have at National Patient Data Day, but also beyond. So that's just a little bit of context there. LifeArc as an organisation has been around for a little while, and I'll talk about our history in just a moment. But the reason that we're particularly excited to be working with you all at the moment is because increasingly we're thinking about how important health data is to making life sciences life-changing. And as part of that, we are developing a health data strategy. And we really want to make sure that anything that we do with health data can be transformative to patient care, but also is transparent and done securely and in a way that resonates with patients and the public as being safe, secure and meaningful. And we're hoping that you can play a really important role in helping us achieve those kind of dual goals. We're going to try and use plain language as much as we can and avoid acronyms, but please keep us honest, and I'm sure Chris will help us with that if we do fall into using technical terms or abbreviations that don't mean anything to anyone outside of LifeArc, but please feel free to correct us as we go on that front. So I'm just going to briefly introduce your speakers for this afternoon. So my name's Becca Cosgriff. You can call me Becca or Rebecca, I really don't mind. And I'm a scientific director at LifeArc for health data strategy. And I've just joined in the middle of January, so that's about 5 months ago. Prior to that, I worked at NHS England, looking after a large investment programme called Data for Research and Development. But I've also worked for medical research charities in NHS trusts and in universities in the past as well. And assuming my colleagues can get off of mute, Sam, I might ask you to say a quick hello before talk.
Thanks, Becca. Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Genway. I'm LifeArc Scientific Director for Machine Learning and AI. And my journey into health data really began with a foundation in applied maths and physics, and that sort of led me naturally into AI for scientific applications. Now, over the years, I've worked across life sciences from early discovery of therapeutics through to clinical trials, and more recently in digital health applications. And what really excites me about this space is that data and digital is not just a tool to support other activities, but actually it's a modality for impact in its own right, capable of really transforming how we understand disease, how we think about diagnosing and treating patients. So pleasure to be part of the session.
Sam and Tor, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Tor. I'm Scientific Director for Clinical Data Applications. What that means in practice is that I look after the team of clinical data scientists who use health data from out and about to address unmet patient needs, kind of find solutions for the questions that there still are. I joined LifeArc around 7 years ago. In my old life, I was a biomedical statistician, and the clinical data side I had covered from very early on in my career at university, through clinical studies, research studies, before coming back to this only sort of 2.5 years ago in LifeArc, when we decided that actually for a translational organization, for an organization to move kind of solutions from the idea stage to the patient point of view or patient availability, we really need clinical data and work with clinical data, because that's where all the evidence is on how something works, why something works, and also what needs to be worked on. So we're quite excited to set up the clinical data sciences team, and that's what I've been doing ever since. Thanks, Becca.
Sure. So that's your dream team for today. My and all of our boss, Andrew Leach, is going to join us at about 1:30. So after the presentation, but to help us with the Q&A section. So he'll pop up and can say a quick hello later on. So without further ado, I'll give you an introduction to this organisation that we keep mentioning, LifeArc. At the most basic level, LifeArc is a medical research charity. We hope that we help turn great science into real treatments for people. So when we talk about being a translational organisation, that's what we mean. We turn science into something that is directly and tangibly impactful on people affected by, in our case, rare diseases and other underserved conditions. They're the areas that we focus on. We're a not-for-profit organisation, as you would expect from a medical research charity, and we're independent. And independence for us means a couple of different things. It means we're not a government organisation, so we're not an organisation like the Department of Health or NHS England, who you might have heard from in the past. But we can be independent because we're a self-funding medical research charity. So some charities rely on funding that they get directly from government, or maybe major donors, or people who run marathons or do fundraising, whereas LifeArc is self-funding, and I'll explain how we're a self-funding charity in a little bit, but it means that we can operate in a way that's independent from other forces that might otherwise influence what we do. And we hope that that means we can be really laser focused on serving these unmet needs that otherwise can get neglected because of other pressures. And this is our Chief Executive, Sam Barrell. She joined the organisation in November last year, and she sums all of that up quite nicely by saying that we translate science into impact for people with rare disease and underserved conditions. So I'm going to move on to just a little bit of history and how we came about as an organisation. We started life as part of the MRC, which stands for the Medical Research Council, and we were part of the MRC called MRC Technology, which sometimes gets shortened to MRCT. And our job at that point as an organisation, although it was before Sam, Tor and I started, was to help take promising science, which was often developed in universities, so academic organisations and other really early stage research, and turn it into something that could actually reach patients. So these fantastic ideas didn't sort of languish in a lab, they actually got as far as they needed to make an impact. And then, so that was in 1992 that we came about as MRCT. And then in 2017, that's when we became LifeArc, as we're known now. And that name was specifically chosen because it reflects what we try and do, because we're an arc or a bridge between science and impact. So if you only remember one thing about LifeArc, hopefully the logo is a bit of a memory prompt that we try and be a bridge between science and impact. And then a really significant part of our journey came in 2019, as you can see on the slide, hopefully, where we received quite a large sum of funding, which came from royalties of a cancer drug that's called Keytruda. The reason that we got royalties from that cancer drug, which you may have heard of, it's the world's biggest selling drug, was because LifeArc staff helped to develop the early technology behind that drug. And because that innovation was protected through something called intellectual property, which some of you may have heard of, it's often abbreviated to IP, we were able to secure a return after that drug became successful. So that's the story about how we're self-funding. And I've spent a bit of time on that because it's quite unusual for an organisation like ours. So what that really means is because we protected and licensed a scientific discovery that we helped to realise, we can reinvest the proceeds from that into our charitable activities, so more science to deliver more impact. So all of that money goes back into either helping us to remain sustainable, but all for the purpose of delivering impact to patients, and in our case, as I said, with rare disease. What you can see on the slide is a reference to the fact that when we got a kind of windfall of new funding as a result of that monetisation, we thought we needed a new strategy to reflect that. So that was launched, and that's where we get our strapline, which is to make life science life-changing. And we committed to using our financial freedoms to tackle some of the toughest health challenges, which, as I've already referred to, sometimes get left behind or neglected. So looking ahead, we want to stay sustainable as an organisation so we can keep making an impact into the future. And that might include future royalties or intellectual property returns, but always with the goal of reinvesting into science that impacts patients. So I've spent quite a lot of time talking about our funding model and how we have that self-funding setup, but we don't only give out funding. That's a really key component to what we do, and kind of money makes the world go round and makes things happen. But we also have a lot of experts who work in LifeArc who can provide advice to people who are doing research. So that's another one of the support offerings that we have available. And we still do our own science. I've referred to that a little bit, in that we might have future opportunities to have royalty returns from science that we develop. And that's because we have what we call in-house science platforms, and data science increasingly, which is what Sam, Tor and I represent, is another one of those platforms where we do our own science as well as funding research in that area. And I've mentioned kind of very simply, we focus on rare diseases and global health, which is often focused on what we call resistant infections or antimicrobial resistance. But we can break that down into a little bit more detail, particularly if you might have a particular interest in one of these areas. So an area of focus for us is childhood cancer. Childhood cancer is intrinsically kind of inevitably rare, so that falls under that rare disease umbrella. And we also have a real interest in respiratory health. That's partly because that's another one of those areas that has a lot of unmet need. It often gets left behind. More and more, we're focusing on rare infections in the respiratory space. And finally, as well as rare disease and global health, another area of focus for us is neurodegeneration, so conditions affecting the brain. And particularly, we're focused on MND and rare dementias. So that's a subset of neurodegenerative conditions that comes under umbrella terms like dementia and Alzheimer's, which are common in themselves, but there are rare versions of them that we want to focus on. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Sam to talk a little bit more specifically about data science. And Sam, just let me know when you want me to move the slides.
Many thanks, Becca. So perhaps if we move to the first slide of this section, I thought it would be good to start with a quick discussion as to why health data is important. And it really is more than just a collection of numbers. It's fundamental to understanding the impact of disease on people. It enables us to map the progression of disease right from early indicators through to outcomes. And as such, it's a core part of translational research, and it can help us with a number of different activities, whether that's tailoring interventions to patients, helping personalize their care. It can help to inform the design of more efficient clinical trials, which mean that new therapeutics can reach patients more quickly. And indeed, when it is done well, it really can shorten that time from research through to impact, and it can generate the evidence needed to show that a novel intervention of whatever kind is effective. And that can be whether that's a new drug, or whether it's a digital tool, or whether it's a kind of medical device. If we can move to the next slide, a few words about how LifeArc uses health data. Now, as Becca highlighted, we have a data science team, and we run our own data science projects, and we use a range of techniques from statistics, machine learning, and other modeling approaches applied to real-world health data. And this is how we play a direct role in translational research. Now, we aren't data providers like organizations such as Genomics England, NHS England, or UK Biobank, but we do access data sets such as these to do our own research or to enable the research of others. And in fact, we collaborate with organizations like those, with academic groups, with clinicians, and indeed industry to scale our impact. And the kinds of projects that we do sort of span a range of areas. They may be detecting subtle signals in rare disease populations to help flag risks earlier. They may be around actually developing applications which use data to support decision-making within a healthcare pathway. That might be supporting a diagnosis. It might be in the support of decision-making around a treatment. May also involve supporting trials and enabling them to reflect the diversity of the real world, so the real population of disease sufferers in a particular disease area. Now, keeping data safe and private is absolutely at our core, and we do that through the projects that we run, the people who deliver those projects, and the infrastructure we use alongside data minimization and how we process the output. So there are strict rules and governance in place around keeping data safe and private. If we move on to the next slide, I wanted to say a few words about how we see patients as partners. Now, of course, patients take part in research all the time, but it's really important to us that patients help us shape our focus so that we're able to put our emphasis on the areas which are going to make the biggest difference to people's lives. We can also help then design studies that are actually most relevant, most accessible, and most inclusive. And we also value sharing findings in a way that's understandable to patients and the wider public. We recently joined over 25 leading organisations in pledging to raise the standard of public involvement, and this is one of the ways in which we ensure that we address real-world needs that lead to better outcomes for patients and, of course, the wider community. So if we move to the next slide, I thought it'd be helpful to focus a little bit on our own investment in capability in this space. We've developed a platform for clinical and health data sciences. This is a major new investment for LifeArc, and it focuses on translational impact from data and data science. And it allows us to deliver projects, of which Tor is going to say more about next after my section, and service in the areas that I've focused on the previous slides. Now, we can focus, therefore, on the disease areas which are aligned with LifeArc's mission in terms of impact in rare disease and global health, and we can support translation and the adoption of data, devices, and digital health. And as a core part of that investment, we've become a founding partner of Our Future Health. Our Future Health is the largest research program of its kind, and it brings together data from up to 5 million volunteers, and actually also has the largest number of participants for underrepresented groups. So we're really excited about the impact we can have with this data resource, as well as being able to invest in something which can drive impact across the ecosystem. Next, I thought it would be helpful to talk a little bit about what it means to have a data science capability at LifeArc. What have we been building? And it turns out there are a range of skill sets involved in delivering impact from data. And these are highlighted on the hexagons on this slide. So on the left-hand side, you can see areas such as cheminformatics, bioinformatics, and these are key for the translational science which is involved in the development of new drugs. We move over to the middle, you can see the clinical data science area, which Tor mentioned in his introduction, and that's key to us delivering applications using health data. Now, translation also involves creating data pipelines. That's how we process health data, and indeed creating software solutions. And this is a capability that we have in-house, and that's the fourth block along. And finally, the area that I lead, machine learning and AI. Now, this is a core capability, and it actually spans across applications because it allows us to get insight from data. If we move to the next slide, before I hand over to Tor, I thought it would be helpful to just cover off the different kinds of things that we do within data sciences. So the first area you can see there is how we provide support to the areas of focus within LifeArc, the translational challenges. These are the disease areas that Becca highlighted where there are unmet needs under the umbrella of rare disease and global health. We also deliver our own translational projects in data science, and Tor is going to give some more concrete examples of that next. We develop capability platforms and we build infrastructure, and for example, those support us in translating research in the digital space into tools that can be used in a clinical context. The fourth block along is all about the support that we provide. So we do provide domain expertise, we provide consultancy, we review both internally and externally, and that helps with decision-making about projects across the board. And finally, we are a driver of translation and the adoption of digital and data solutions. And that's something that we do through our own projects, but also through advocacy in the ecosystem. So hopefully that's a brief overview, which allows me now to hand over to Tor to talk about our portfolio of projects in this space.
Thanks, Sam. And I'm only really going to do 2 slides, which will give you a little flavor of the sorts of health data projects we do and how we came to do them. And I think that will suffice for today, maybe spur some questions. So if we can move on to my first slide. This is basically the process by which we have decided to do a certain health data project or not. And I'll guide you through that from left to right. So normally what we do on left, we try to figure out what's the unmet need for patients or clinicians. The way we do that is normal. We have in-house teams of like 20 to 30 scientists and other individuals who work on a particular disease area, the ones that Becca pointed out. They also work with patient engagement groups out there, and kind of between science and patients and clinicians, we know sort of what's lacking in that particular disease. And it might be that not enough trials are there kind of to be joined, or people don't know what to join. It might be that early accurate diagnoses that's missing. It might be better treatment decisions. It might be the patient journey and finding bottlenecks and why they occur in a patient's journey. Once we know what the unmet need is, we go to the second column there. So in data science, what health data can we actually use to address that question? And broadly, from your own group, you might know there's sort of three categories of data out there. One is a sort of data resource where you and I can just go and sign up as healthy individuals, as volunteers, to have our data measured over time. The other one is where we are maybe specifically asked as patients with a given condition if we would like to join a registry. So where we followed up over time under that particular health condition. And the third one is where we don't really volunteer, but where the NHS or in other countries, other healthcare systems collect our data, which might be made available for research like this. So we have our kind of sources that we go to. Some of them mentioned there. Our Future Health is one that Sam mentioned. Others are basically whatever we need to address a question, we'll try to gain access to it and work with that data. Once we have the data, we figure out what methodology we use. It might be what Sam does primarily, is use AI, machine learning, to identify deep insights from data. Or more classically, and that's where I come from, use statistics to answer a very specific question with very specific ways of analysis. Or thirdly, we might just review something in terms of data, the quality of it, to arrive at some insight that we need. Once we have done the analysis part and the review part, we really are interested in what asset does that generate. So what do we have that's actually of potential use to people with a health condition? It might be, hey, there's a trial cohort over there that should be followed up, that should be kind of joined by individuals with a health condition. It might be AI as a medical device. That's where the algorithm can make or support the clinician in making a decision for treatment, or where the algorithm can make a diagnosis from data. Or it might be an asset that is an evidence package, as in we need to know these things in order for that diagnostic test to be progressed towards the patient. So if we have that asset from what we have done here, we will then lastly think about how do we actually and practically get that to the patient. And that will be following what we call regulatory pathways, and you're probably familiar with, or CE marking and adoption. Let us see what's the test, what's the studies you need to perform to make sure that what you have created works in the intended setting, is acceptable by the NHS, for example, and is also sort of sufficiently evidenced to be commercially available, so it's safe and secure to use. And I'll show you on the next slide, if we move on, a few examples on what that's led to. So on the left-hand side, the box, that's the things on our current health data science portfolio. On the right-hand side is more what we're moving towards next. If we go into the left-hand side, I'll just rattle off a few examples. One, which is in Sam's team, is imaging AI. So we're looking at a set of computer tomography lung scans for people with a lung condition. And we're checking if we can build an AI model that can look at those CT lung scans and say if the individual in front of the clinician is at risk of a worsening of that condition over the year or not. If yes, they can be treated accordingly, for example. The top right, a digital app. We are funding a study in Zambia and Kenya on antimicrobial stewardship, where they have been using a digital app that lets the healthcare professional know what they should be treating with, given the bacterial infection they're presenting with. That is written down in paper in 80 pages somewhere, but a digital app will make that much more efficient to be used in the field, and we're currently testing that in the study. The middle left, cohort selection, Our Future Health. We now have a study underway with Our Future Health, where we're initially trying to find, for the rare diseases of interest to LifeArc, what groups of participants are actually in Our Future Health who could be contacted to join trials, to join studies, or have the data analyzed for specific needs. On the middle right, the machine learning model label, that's plainly we are accessing bronchiectasis, which is a lung condition, health records in a registry that have been merged with NHS data. And we're trying to find out if we can find symptoms or features in the health data that allow those patients to be sent to clinicians much sooner than they currently are. So a current diagnosis takes 5 to 12 years for bronchiectasis. We want people to be seen sooner by consultants who can easily diagnose this, but they don't get to see the patients. And we have completed a piece of work, bottom left, epidemiological evidence, where we've looked at GP records from across the UK to find out where trigeminal neuralgia, which is a rare facial pain condition, where the patients are in the UK, how many of them there are, how many new ones there are every year, and if there's anything we can do about finding out what their early symptoms are that might also help to refer them to a trigeminal neuralgia consultant. Much sooner than in this case, sometimes 17 years that they take to get to see one of them. So that's the current portfolio, or rather it's a part of it. That's how we've been doing things. And now with Becca's support in LifeArc, we're really moving to a more strategic footing, saying, how can we connect up all these things? How can we work at larger scale? How can we work up solutions that are not for one particular rare disease, but for a whole kind of family or a section of rare diseases? And how can we get this from early diagnoses and other things to really what's needed in the clinical trial space that gets treatments to patients? And kind of how can we influence the data ecosystem in the UK to make things work smoother? Because at the moment, and I will say this in very professional terms, it can be a total mess. So we will not solve this, but we'll see what we can do to help in our particular areas. And I want to finish here. Thank you.
Tor and Sam, and thank you to everyone for listening to that. We're really interested in any questions that you have for us. This is actually one of the first times that we've spoken to patients and the public in this level of detail about the work we're doing in health data. So any questions you've got for us about things that maybe didn't make sense or weren't clear, that's really useful for us because it helps us understand how to do this better next time. And also any kind of direct tips or hints about how we can explain things to an audience maybe with less experience than the group that we're speaking to now would be useful. But we have got some prompt questions on the screen just to maybe help get things started, but don't feel restricted by these. So hopefully it's clear we're looking to develop a health strategy, but we really want your help. We're interested sort of generally, how do you feel about what you've heard today? Does it make you feel excited? Are there any worries that you've got? What might help you feel confident about how your data are being used by LifeArc? Are there any good examples that we can learn from that you've seen in the past? Because these are people who we can maybe reach out and speak to. And we'd like to keep you informed and involved as we develop the health data strategy beyond national patient day-to-day. So hopefully we'll see some of you in Leeds. So we'd be really interested to hear how we can keep you involved as we move forward. And Chris has kindly agreed to help us chair the questions. So Chris, I'll hand back to you to have a grilling from anyone who wants to give us one.
Thanks, Becca. And again, just a reminder that we won't put these questions in on the web, so you can ask whatever you want.